Hello everyone, it's Paul Moore from Columbia Threadneedle Investments. Just this afternoon talking about changes that have been introduced by Europe as part of their EU Sustainable Finance Action Plan, but in particular talking about two new regulations, those being the EU Taxonomy and the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, sometimes referred to as SFDR. Just a word on Brexit, I think, before turning to those regulations. Notwithstanding that the UK has left the European Union and these regulations have not been onshored into UK law, they are relevant for UK asset managers where they are distributing and selling funds to clients in Europe. Taking each of the regulations in turn, SFDR at a high level and broadly speaking introduces three changes. The first change went live in March this year, and that relates to sustainability risk. Now there, asset managers need to disclose to investors their processes for integrating sustainability risk. By definition, we know that this is financial risk management, and fund managers in a real estate context would need to start thinking about how concepts like physical risk and transition risk caused by climate change may start to impact the value of the properties held in their real estate funds. The second change goes live in January 2022 and concerns how portfolios may be adversely impacting sustainability factors. Now there, and by January next year, asset managers will need to disclose on their websites their policy, which outlines their approach towards identifying the adverse impacts to those sustainability factors and their approach towards managing them. Europe has, in February of this year, prescribed very clear indicators for the real estate sector, and these include matters relating to greenhouse gas emission, exposure to fossil fuel, and energy intensity. The first step is just to disclose the policies which outline the approach, but by 2023, we will need to start disclosing on our website the impact that our portfolios are having to those said sustainability indicators. The idea is that over time we start reducing those harms, and it's an annual disclosure that we need to make thereafter. SFDR finally introduces two new categories of ESG funds. We refer to these as Article 8 or light green funds. The technical name is a fund which promotes an environmental or social characteristic. Their very clear prescriptive templates do need to be filled out and published on our website, in our pre-contractual documents, and in our annual reports from January 2022 onwards. There's another category for ESG funds. These are the dark green spectrum, Article 9, funds which have a sustainable investment and objective. And again, disclosures do need to be made in accordance with the templates that have been prepared by Europe. Finally, just to wrap things up and to turn to the EU taxonomy, this is again part of a disclosure. Asset managers for their ESG funds, their Article 8, their Article 9 funds, are going to have to disclose the extent to which, if at all, those funds are aligned and complying with the taxonomy. The taxonomy is really seeking to introduce a harmonized reporting framework, a disclosure framework, and introduces three stages that need to be considered by asset managers. The very first step is to consider whether the portfolio or the properties held in the portfolio are aligned or substantially contributing to one of 6 environmental objectives. So far, Europe has only given us criteria for 2 of those environmental objectives. Those are climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation. And in a real estate context, we do see with climate change mitigation clear technical screening criteria for real estate. And the second step to be considered is whether those properties held in the portfolio are significantly harming any of the other environmental objectives. And then finally, and thirdly, there's a need to consider whether those investments, those properties, are in line with international social safeguards.
Hi, I'm Nina Reid. I'm Head of Responsible Investment at M&G Real Estate. I'm providing insight from the industry on the impact of SFDR and the EU taxonomy, and why us as a real estate industry should care about this and what are the implications. For those of you less familiar with M&G real estate, we manage around 36 billion of assets under management worldwide, and a number of our funds are caught by both the SFDR and EU taxonomy regulations. So we, along with much of the rest of the industry, have been grappling over the past 6 months or so, working out how our funds align with the various criteria of the SFDR level 1 regulations, which Paul described earlier. That involved classifying our funds, and then undertaking things like updating our prospectuses in line with the regulation. We are at the moment working our way through the level 2 requirements, which have been published alongside the EU taxonomy requirements, both of which the level 2 and the taxonomy start to kick in from next year. So why should we care? Well, because I think the taxonomy and SFDR reflect a sort of trend that most of us in the real estate sector have already seen over a number of years, particularly driven by existing investor benchmarks such as GRESB, which have been driving towards greater transparency in the market around ESG performance of funds. And as we've sort of seen with GRESB, the focus over the sort of past few years has moved from one of tick boxing around policy to very much looking at performance. And what SFDR and the EU taxonomy do is further drive that against a set of comparable standards. What it will help is for investment managers and funds being able to actually clearly differentiate themselves in the market if they are leading in ESG performance. Sort of prior to SFDR and the taxonomy, it was relatively easy for managers to make claims about the ESG credentials and sustainability credentials, and this is across all sectors of the market, without necessarily having to be compared against other funds on a set of consistent criteria. What SFDR and the taxonomy will introduce is more consistency. However, these are new regulations. They are extremely complex in parts, and probably what we're going to see over the next few years or so is the industry kind of adjusting to what those requirements mean, and also probably there'll be a period of needing to understand the criteria and probably a degree of refinement around them, because some of the criteria in the SFDR level 2 regs, for example, and probably in the taxonomy, aren't necessarily going to be consistently adhered to across the industry because of some of the difficulties around data collection, but also the fact that the indicators aren't necessarily consistent across the EU market. And I think we'll probably see a period of the industry learning and feeding back, and hopefully getting those criteria refined to really meaningful, simple to use indicators that people are consistently reporting against. What is clear is this is the start of greater disclosure, greater transparency and greater comparability across the market on ESG performance, which we believe will increasingly drive investor decision making about where to place their capital.